Welcome, I'm Jon Caldara, president of the Independence Institute and your devil's advocate. Later on, we're going to talk about some of the demographic changes happening in Colorado and what that means for politics. But first, I've always wondered about the child welfare system here in Colorado. I'm talking about foster kids, how it works. Ned Breslin is with the Tennyson Center. Thank you so much for being here. First of all, quick definition, what is the Tennyson Center?
Tennyson Center for Children is a residential, community-based NSSU unit focused on...
NSS, you've already lost me.
Fair point. It's a resident... Should we start again?
Let me try it again.
Yeah.
Do we have good old-fashioned orphanages anymore?
So Tennyson started as an orphanage, and a lot of people look at it and they think of it as an orphanage because we have 24 beds where kids whose parental rights have been terminated live. And so we're trying to get them back into the community, back into families.
And your goal is, if there's a kid in one of your beds at Tennyson, you want to get them out of that bed and into a family situation.
100%. You do not want a kid growing up in an institutional residential facility.
I've seen Annie. It seemed to work out well for her.
Yeah, Annie misguides us, doesn't she?
Well,
She's cute.
There is this image. There really is this image.
Yeah, no, sure.
And growing up our age, that the kid goes to the orphanage, rough and tumble, but he comes out of it and he goes sees Father O'Malley when he grows up, and that's completely bogus.
It's completely bogus. I think the real challenge is you got a bunch of kids who actually need the safety and stability of a home to be able to grow and thrive and go to school properly. And when you take them out of that environment, even if it's for the right reason and even if it's for a short time, you got to find a way to get them back, because it's not. The research is clear. Everybody knows that if you keep a kid in an institutional facility too long, their progress is stunted, their healing is stunted, and their ability to thrive as an adult is limited.
So as much as my parents threatened to put me either...
It's a big threat.
Send me to the orphanage or sell me for experiments, I never really had any worries. So I have no idea how this system works. Sure. Could you kind of go through why would a child be taken away from parents?
So there's
I can think of a million, but...
Yeah, there's a kid, there are a bunch of kids at Tennyson. Here's a very simple story. Kid comes to Tennyson, his parents were addicted to something. Sometimes they pimped him out, sometimes they...
Sexually pimped him out.
Oh, absolutely. Wow. And so, and they're having a difficult time, and we get it, but they're using their children in inappropriate ways. Those children are going through extreme violence, extreme trauma. They're struggling, so departments of human services, police, hospitals, sometimes teachers will find them and see this, and they will intervene, and they'll realize that home is not safe, and so they will take them out.
What is the due process there? Because as a parent, there's always that fear. Sure. Somebody, says you're abusing your kids and they're going to take them away from you. What is the process?
So it depends on the nature of the abuse. So there's a lot of families we work with that the parents are struggling with things like discipline, struggling with some addiction, or struggling with jobs, struggling with a whole bunch of things. There are ways to repair that family and to work with that family so they can not transmit trauma, but they can actually heal in those families. Those are the best situations, because you want to keep kids with their parents. Sometimes it's not possible. And so what ends up happening is you either try to find maybe an aunt or an uncle. What's happening in Colorado, which is incredible, is a lot of these kids are going to live with their grandparents. And so I was just at a family, just to give an example, I was at a family up in Weld County, 74-year-old grandmother who's taking care of her 6-year-old granddaughter. They've adopted her, but her first act in life was to detox from heroin. And so the county actually did the right thing by intervening. They found the grandmother. The kid's 6, the grandmother's 74. That's working right now, but in 10 years that's not working. So the question is what are you going to do with that family? We're putting immense pressure on grandparents, actually.
The more I learn about what foster kids have to go through, the more sympathetic I become, because you don't even think about these things, particularly when they get older. But let's finish this chain. So a child comes
to a place like Tennyson. You try to put him into a foster home. We do a couple things. So Tennyson, if you come onto our campus, we basically try to create real safety for you. So stabilize you, because I don't know if I trust you, you're an
Right.
adult, so there's a whole bunch of that. We do an enormous amount of therapy to help them process what they have gone through. We try to keep them on track educationally or help them catch up. And then we try to reintegrate them back into Colorado. We try to get them into, say, foster families, a kinship family, an adoptive family, somebody who can actually take them forward. And then we'll provide support to those
How
families.
often are foster families becomes a shell game that first it's this foster family, but for some reason it doesn't work out.
Yeah.
Then it's the next one, and then that doesn't work out. This poor kid has to go from family to family
Yep.
to family, stranger to stranger to stranger.
Yeah, it's really hard. If you come to Tennyson, you've probably been in 10 to 15 placements before you get to us. So you've been bouncing
What?
around. Yeah.
Explain that.
There are 6, 7, 8-year-old children at Tennyson who have been in 8, 9, 10 foster families or residential
I
facilities.
can't imagine what that does.
I don't know how we think a child like that can feel safe. It's crazy. And that's happening all over the country. So
And why?
It's
Why?
because-
Why can't? If you need to take a child out of a dangerous situation,
Sure.
why can't they go to a secure place that doesn't change? I mean, it's just
Yeah, because I think one of the problems is, as you can imagine, the trauma and the way it manifests in children varies. And so it's very hard to say this kid right now who's in this situation could go into your home and be fine. You might be fine for a while, and then something happens which your family actually can't handle, and so you get to a place where your family's imploding. The pressure on foster families often is enormous because kids are processing their trauma often without support or without real lasting support. That's one of the things Tennyson's trying to do is wrap support around the family so that they can actually
does
thrive.
a foster family get reimbursed, paid?
They do, yeah. There's this kind of thought that people do it to make money. The money is tiny. It's not, it's not going to make or break. It's not going to make your family. It often breaks your family, and most foster families actually end up paying out a lot.
Has there ever been a situation where somebody? What's the most amount of foster kids in one foster home?
So
I mean,
it's a really good question. The law
image,
is changing. No,
the
it's a
image
great
being
question.
that there's some lady who smokes
there's
a
like
lot,
a barn in the back,
and there's a barn in the
and-
back with bunk beds.
Yeah, there are things called group homes, which are sort of along the lines of what you're talking about. You can have eight kids in one house. That's not the most common thing, though, to be perfectly honest. The biggest challenge in the sector is if you are with siblings. So let's imagine myself and my brother and my sister, so there's 3 of us. There are very few families who'll take all 3 of us. So what sometimes happens is you get broken up, and that is traumatic, again, because there's a bit of a bond between you, as is right. One of the kids usually has been parentified very quickly, so they've actually had to take on the role of the parent. They're protective, and all of a sudden those kids are gone. And they're like, is my brother safe? Is my sister safe? And so that adds to the trauma. One of the bills that was passed here in Colorado's Sibling Bill of Rights is actually making it absolutely essential for siblings to be able to come back together and to try new ways to find families that can keep them all together. That matters.
Oh,
Can you
incredible.
imagine?
No, I can't.
Yeah.
I can't imagine. You can imagine.
I can't imagine.
Do you mind? Because you're drawn
No.
to this for a reason. Tell me.
I joined Tennyson a couple years ago. My childhood was very similar to what we're talking about. So my mom and dad were terrible alcoholics. My father was physically, emotionally, sexually abusive. My mother's alcohol was of the sort that she'd wake up every morning and forget and sweep the horrors of the night before under a carpet that never saturated and just said, your dad loves you. And I didn't know what that means. When I was 15 years old, my dad took out an ad in a newspaper in Buffalo, New York, where we did not live, and said, does anyone want my kid? And so I walked into a stranger's house, and he drove away. And that did not work out. So it wasn't a formal foster situation, but it was the same thing. And I ended up on the street, and I ended up stealing quite a bit. And a student at my high school, I used to sleep under the bleachers of my high school football thing and scurry into the bathroom and take a quick shower every morning. But a student saw me stealing, I think, and let me stay with them for a couple months. And then the next year I stayed with another family. And the nice part of that story is, and I'm hesitant to tell this to foster families, but I stupidly fell in love with their daughter. Like she was phenomenal, right? How can you argue? And we've actually been together for 37 years.
Wow, and and their parents still don't know.
They
That's
don't
amazing.
know. Yes.
That's
We're going to
amazing.
tell them. My eldest daughter's graduating from CSU, and we're going to tell my mother-in-law this weekend.
That's good plan. There was another. So there were a couple bills that passed that I think are helpful. One you just mentioned, so that siblings. I can't imagine this is your support network, and the only way to help them is to rip them apart.
Yep.
And that's just so crazy to begin with.
Yeah.
The other thing I didn't realize was. If you're 16 in this state, you can get a driver's license if your parents give you permission to do so.
Yes, and if you're in foster care, you can't.
And if you're in foster care, you can't. If you are 16 and you have a driver's license and you have access to a car, it means you can go to school. You can go to a job.
You can get a job.
You can get
out with your
training.
friends.
You can hang out with your friends. You can build a support network. It's the mobility we all crave. How often did somebody go all the way to 18 without a driver's license, and then at 18, and I want to ask you a bit more detail, do they get kicked out of the system?
Yeah, so I'll tell you the thing. Everything you said is exactly right. Your ability to get a job, your ability to go hang out with your friends, go to school, take on responsibility, all that stuff matters. But I'll tell you, if you talk to foster kids who can't get their licenses, the thing that's the hardest for them is all the kids in school around them are getting their driver's license, and they can't. And what they say is, because I don't have a driver's license, people still don't recognize me. They don't see me. So I'm not even a person yet. And that adds to the trauma. That adds to some of the difficulty of the journey.
And now there's a law, let's be clear.
One of
the successes of this session was to change that so these kids can get a driver's license.
I think the success of this session was there are a handful of bills, Sibling Bill of Rights, driver's license, that are really trying to normalize the lives of kids in the foster care and child welfare system. And that's needed because they have enough challenges to deal with to restrict them and to undermine their ability to actually thrive and heal is crazy. And so, reps and senators got together, and these bills were not contentious. These bills went through. These matter.
These were truly bipartisan
Absolutely,
bills.
And they, real great leadership shown. And what I loved about it is they were passed because people could imagine the world through the eyes of these kids and said that is not right. So let's change it, and I think that's fabulous.
All right, let me ask you. Let me wrap it up this way.
Sure.
So at 18, what happens?
At 18, if you age out, and some states are changing it to 21 and 24 because I don't know about you, but at 18, that's not a particularly good place to all of a sudden be, hey man, I'm ready to go. I'm an adult. And so what ends up happening, and the data is absolutely clear, is if you age out of the system, 47% are unemployed. Almost half are incarcerated within 2 years. GED, 27% will get a GED or equivalent. About 6% will graduate from college. Addiction, PTSD, all these things are huge, and it comes from never stabilizing along that path. And I think what a lot of organizations are doing, like Tennyson and others, are sitting back and saying, can we imagine a different world? Can we imagine a different pathway? We're trying to figure out, how do you intervene early enough? Because unfortunately, the way the system works is you have to fail so badly. You have to get to such a bad place that we can actually start to help. But there's all these opportunities earlier to intervene that would keep you out of the system.
The final question, real fast. People want to help. I'm sure you need donations, of course. What is the one thing you need beyond money?
The one thing we need beyond money is for people to actually start to rally around families who have foster kids or who are in trouble, and instead of isolating them, because everybody talks, this grandma up in Weld, what she talks about is she's completely isolated. She has been marginalized. Her church is like, what's wrong with that family? She did a bad job as a mom because her daughter became a drug addict and all that kind of stuff. We have to actually start rallying around these families, and instead of saying they're a problem, that's a bad kid, that's a bad parent, we need to start saying, hey, church, neighbors, all that need to come together.
And you probably also need more foster families.
We absolutely need more foster families.
People want more information, where do they go?
TennysonCenter.org.
Tennyson Center. Ned, thank you. Incredible
Thanks so
stuff.
much.
Stay tuned.